Hello, folks, and welcome to yet another panel here at Incan Panels today. We've talked about so many amazing subjects today, but after we've talked about, what it requires for you to work with artists, how to write books, we've talked with different artists in the industry. I think one of the things that's probably the most daunting aspect, or can be the most daunting aspect of making comic books, is actually getting your comic books out to the people who you want to read them, actually selling the books, getting them out there on the market. So, with me today, I have three stellar comic book creators who are absolute geniuses at getting their books into the hands of their readers. So without further ado, I'm going to let these three gentlemen introduce themselves in no particular order, whoever feels comfortable. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the folks who may not be familiar with you.
So my name is Lonzo Starr. I'm the CEO and founder of Concrete Comics, writer and creator of Legendary Acolyte, Zoriel, and a slew of other titles. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my name is Frederick L. Jones. I'm the founder and publisher of a brand called Saturday AM. We're the world's largest manga brand that's outside of Japan that's Black owned. And our books are sold around the world. We've got some major IP like Clock Striker and Apple Black, and a new title we just launched called Orisha. And we're just continuing to push to get more normalization of diversity inside of the manga realm.
And my name is Newton Lillavois. I'm an independent comic book publisher, mostly known for Crescent City Monsters and Keisha Demon Eater. I've also co-wrote a book with TJ Sterling of Ray Comics called Shattered Visions. And thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And if you guys have not had the opportunity to read any of these books, Acolyte's absolutely phenomenal book. Apple Black, top tier. Crescent City Monsters is one of my gems within my own collection. So I'm truly a fan, standing amongst some of the greats in the indie comic book space for sure. So you gentlemen have such a breadth of just information about being in this business, but probably, as I mentioned before, one of the most difficult aspects is once you've completed your product, now it's time to get it into the hands of the people. For each of you gentlemen, what was your kind of strategy before actually making it to the market? What was some of the ways that you guys decided that you were actually going to bring your product to market? And we'll start with Lonzo, then we'll move to Fred, and then we'll move to Newton.
So for me, my first strategy was to really just look at what the community was doing, what was missing from it, and what was successful and what wasn't successful. And where I stood in that whole spectrum, right? So I realized where I could fit in, what people were missing, and what they needed, and I decided to fill that void. I looked for that problem, which was representation was a big problem in comics when I first started in 2017, 2018, and just learn the business. Really, that's really what I need to do. Learn the business, learn printing, who to print with. So many printers, but you you stumble upon some good ones, and you come across some ones that waste your time. But because at the end of the day, my biggest thing was I wanted to have my customers trust, be able to be a man of my word, say what I was going to do. If we're going to ship out a book at a certain date, I want to make sure we can actually do that. And just those things. So those were kind of the things I needed to learn before I put my book out into the market, for sure.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's all good. Yeah. We started Saturday back in 2013, and before that, I had a career in the video game industry and was part of a lot of big titles, PlayStation, and so forth. And so the diversity thing has been with me because I've been fighting for civil rights since I was 18, and it was part of the first Million Man March back in 1995. So, I think that I've always been aware of the lack of diversity and the fact that our how we look to people, whether it's through film, TV, and of course comics and manga and video games, all of those play a role in terms of how we advance in society, because how people see us. And D.L. Hughley had a great line years ago. He said, the most dangerous place for a black person to be is in a white person's mind. And I think that, so where we can control how we came across, I think was so important. And so Having been in the video game industry, I saw the lack of diversity in the video game industry, and as I made my way through there for a decade, I saw in the manga space something very similar, because what I saw with manga that was exploding. It's the most popular form of entertainment right now outside of young adult graphic novels. I mean, American comic books don't even come close to what manga does in a general month or year of sales in the U.S. and Germany and of course Japan. So I started looking at that and got really concerned about the lack of diversity in that medium in particular. And so I wanted to create something similar to it. So created Saturday as a result of that. Now, in terms of the distribution, how you got it to market, again, coming from the video game world, I'd already produced and had a lot of video games come out in stores around the world. So that wasn't a thing to me. But one thing that was important to me was that carrying inventory is very hard. So, again, we've got books on shelves, like I said, right now, but when you've got to print them and then hold them, it's very expensive. So when we launched in 2013, my first thought was always digital first, because you had a huge opportunity to reach lots of people globally as well. And then you could kind of formulate a community and then build from there. So we did that. The first year we had a book that we self-printed, came out and did about 8,000 units of that, which is the original Apple Black. And so years later, when it came time to do a distribution deal, we worked with a lot of big publishers, or they sought us out. And so now, like I said, our books are in stores around the world. But all of that, came from saying, I want to try to build something very kind of step by step. The brand and the representation for me was the most important thing. But, once you get all that in, then, of course, getting the printing, as Lonzo said, printers are really difficult to deal with. Most of our stuff is printed in China. But now we live in an era where that might not be possible, given, y'all's crazy president. So you got all this stuff going on. And then you add onto it the fact that finding a good local printer, but then distribution is exceptionally hard. And I guess we'll get to that later. But getting into stores is way different than, it doesn't really matter where you print. That's a whole different ball of wax. So yeah, I think, for us, it was about the diversity angle first and foremost when I started the company. And I would just say the key thing, too, with that was that in manga, the challenge with manga is finding people who can actually deliver the style, right? The style is the key. And what you want are people who can draw it into where even the Japanese respect it. And so, from the very beginning, we had an idea and went after creators who could deliver that type of look with black characters,
Yeah, and so for me, everything started off really at Kickstarter, right? So Kickstarter is a crowdfunding platform, and I was doing Kickstarter and backing these projects, and I was, I'm still a tech guy, so I was backing all these little tech projects. And then I discovered that they had a comic book section, and I took a look at that, and I was like, okay. I was like, oh, these guys are producing their comic books independently, and so I took a look at one of the projects. I backed it. It was by Iron Circus. I'm trying to remember her name. Spike. So Spike, who I guess who started and owns Iron Circus. She had this book called Shadowhawks. I pledged, I got my book. So I got to see the whole process of how Kickstarter worked from the outside. And once I pledged and I got my book, I was really impressed with the book. I love the artwork. I love the story, the quality of the book. And I was like, okay, this isn't any these are indie creators, but it wasn't like the quality was any less than the majors. In fact, sometimes in some ways it was a lot better. And so I discovered, and Spike had this this PDF that she had created at that time. And this was around 2016, I think. And the PDF explained to you how to do your own Kickstarter. And I was like, word, okay. So I was like, and it spelled out like all the things that you had to take into consideration, like shipping, what your goals should be. And so when I saw that, I was like, when I was younger, I used to do comic books, and as I grew older, I had these stories in my head that I wanted to do. So I was like, you know what? I was like, let me try this, because these people are pretty much like me. A lot of them have regular jobs, and this is like a side thing that they're doing. And I said, okay, I think I could do this too. So I was doing some research, because for me, the PDF was the thing that had me started. Like, okay, I can create a comic book. I could get a crowdfunding too. And so I said, all right, so I'm gonna do a little bit more research. And as I was doing more research, they were like, the most popular at that time, I'm not sure if this is still true, but the most popular comic book Kickstarters were people who already had web comics, and their model, right, their business model was like introduce the web comics online for free, build an audience, and then launch a Kickstarter. And because they've amassed the audience, people who's following their work, they would buy the book. So at first I was kind of like, damn, this really works. And because it's kind of counterintuitive, right? Because why would somebody buy something that they've already read online for free? But like I said, it's been done. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna follow this model. So I started working on my comic book. We started sharing the first chapter. I think, yeah, actually, I think we shared the whole chapter. So like you could read the whole chapter of one online. I decided to create my own website because my regular 9 to 5, I'm an IT consultant. So I was able to do that, and I created my own website. I slowly built a following. Went on social media and started telling people like about my book as it was going along, because one of the advice that I saw was like, oh, don't wait to the end to announce what you're doing. Try to do it as soon as possible. So the first I was always sharing the pages, showing what's coming up, and then lo and behold, I followed that model and it worked. After I built a following, because people was actually reading the book online. I think at a certain point, some people even they stopped. They were like, yo, just tell me when the Kickstarter happens. You tell me when the book is ready, because they didn't want to know the end. But yeah, the model worked. The business model worked. Build your audience. And so I did that. And I learned a lot from that in terms of starting off with comic books, right? The idea that you need to really constantly be promoting yourself. Don't be shy to share your work. It's something that it's just part of the business, especially if you're gonna be an independent publisher, right? Hoping that you're only writing, or you're writing and drawing, or just drawing, is like, it just won't happen. You have to kind of do it all. So of course, some things you may need help with, but so I say all that to say is that when you're starting off, and from my experience, and everybody has different experiences, but from my experience, when you're starting off, it's always good to have a plan, like a business plan. It doesn't have to be something formal. You don't have to write pages and pages. It could just be a short outline with some dates or whatever, but have a plan in terms of how you can actually produce the comic book. Just saying, I'm going to get an artist and we're going to draw and having the script, that's just like the beginning of it. You have to figure out, okay, how am I going to market the book? How am I going to sell the book? And because after the plan with the Kickstarter was like, okay, after I have these books, I'm going to go to conventions and then sell my books that way, as another way of introducing people to my books. But then slowly I realized too that I needed an online store, and that took me like 2 or 3 years before I was like, okay, let me do that. So it's a lot of things in terms of business decisions or planning that you have to do.
Right, absolutely. And actually, I really appreciate how each of you you told your story of how you got your business started, and you also kind of showed your approach. So for Lonzo, making sure I understand, for you was you saw that there was a gap in the market as far as diversity. You had a story to tell, and you're like, okay, I can fill this gap in the market, and I want to build brand trust. When I release my story, I want people to believe in what I have to say. And Frederick, for you, you already had experience in a market for video gaming, and you tried to translate. Also saw that hole in the market, specifically in manga. You wanted to fill that, and then you just basically overlapped some of that experience that you had already had in the gaming space to start marketing your manga. And then for Frederick, you kind of went away. I feel like a lot of people who are experiencing this, they're looking for tools online, kind of coming across things online, and then you're like, this is so you can tell your story, and then you came across the Kickstarter PDF, and then with your experience in tech, I'm sure that it really helped you kind of intuitively tap in with the social media space. So I think that's really cool that everyone kind of approaches the business side or approaches the marketing of their book in a different way. My next question, and Newton, you hit on this a little bit. When it came down to, and I think everyone kind of hit on this in their own way, when it comes down to actually, you have your book in your hands, you're ready to put it out. You're ready to put it out. Everyone said you have to worry about printing, you have to think about marketing, you have to build your website, you have to think about conventions. In your personal opinions, how do you approach? How would you approach if you had a new book, if you were doing it all again? Would you start with the digital? Do you suggest going digital and then perhaps going to conventions? Is it more important to focus on marketing, or is it more important to just get physicals out there? What are you guys' thoughts on actually getting your books out to the people? And we'll start with Newton, then we'll go to Lonzo, and then we'll go to Fred.
Yeah, so I have a preference for physical books. In fact, at one point I was selling the digital version of my book online, but I stopped that because first, most people wanted the books in print, and to me, um, that's who I'm aiming for. And I know this is the age of everything being digital, right? But to be honest, the audience that I'm seeking for, my avatar is somebody who likes physical books and are into indie comic books, right? I don't really put a lot of weight in digital. Now, that's not to say that that someone shouldn't go that way, because I could see, if you have the right business plan and you could go all digital, right? I could see that absolutely working for someone. But I chose to just go strictly physical, and it doesn't have to be a either or. You can do both, right? I don't think you have to make a decision as to what um you have to. I don't think you have to be, like I said, you don't have to be either or. You can mix it if you want to. So my suggestion is, I would, in terms of marketing, like I said before, just try to share the journey of what you're creating, right? A lot of times, and I've heard this so many times, people say, oh, I just want to wait till it's ready to show it or to talk about it. And from my experience, it takes a long time and it takes a while to get the word out there in social media. In one respect, it's really quick because people just are out there on the internet. At the same time, you're still trying to build up your audience who's willing to read that book. So so, I mean, what I would say is that make sure you market or announce things as soon as you can. It doesn't have to be immediately, but that's for myself. As I try to keep things close to my chest, but I always end up just yapping off like, "Hey, this is what I'm be working on." So I think one key advice is don't wait. And the other thing too is that I noticed what some people do is they're afraid that they don't want to announce it because somebody's gonna like steal their idea, and
Right.
trust me, that's not gonna happen. The chances of that are very slim because I mean it's hard selling your own ideas. People don't go around stealing other people's ideas and say, "Hey, I'm gonna do this." So I wouldn't really worry about that, and that's the good thing too. If you announce your idea even before you actually do it, if somebody steals it, you're already like on record, announcing your story. So it doesn't, I wouldn't really worry about that. That's the other thing I would say.
Absolutely. For you, Lonzo, what are some of your suggestions for new creators hitting the market? What are some of your suggestions for them, how they should be marketing or should be distributing their book?
Um, it depends on the book, the genre that they're talking in, that they're speaking for, their audience. Just really understanding their audience, and then after that, learning where does your audience go. What Facebook groups are they in, or if you can't find a Facebook group, create it. Create the avenue where people that genuinely like your style of storytelling or books that are similar to yours, create that space for them, that environment where you can start culturing them to know who you are, what you do, learning your product, and then manifesting that cult following. And that's kind of the hardest thing to do, because there's so many books out here, there's so many titles, there's so many dope stories out here. And especially in the indie world, a lot of people, they feel like they got to weed through bad to get to good, but it's really the opposite. It's a lot of good, and then the bad sticks out every now and then. You know what I mean? And just finding a way to really stand out. Like, your book can be a supernatural thriller, just like Crescent City Monsters, but the way you pitch it could be different. The way you explain what's going on in your world, that's where that what really sells people. A lot of people rely. I feel like sometimes in our field, a lot of younger creators rely too much on the weight of the artist's name to sell the book. When a casual reader doesn't know who that artist is, they have no reason to care about them. They just see that the artwork looks good. Now, I hope the story's good. So, that would be my biggest advice. Don't put that much pressure on you. Don't feel like you got to get, Jonathan Hickman to write your story or something like that. Just do what you got to do. Put it out. Find some people to test read your book before you put it out to the public, and trust in that team that you build that test reads your product. And don't be afraid to go to the drawing board and change some things if you need to before you put it out.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And then for you, Frederick, same question. Any suggestions for people new to comic books looking to put out their book? How would you market it, or how would you distribute it?
There we go. Yeah. I mean, look, I obviously I'm all big on the digital thing, so I guess I would have a slight disagreement there. I think digital is clearly the future on so many metrics. I mean, the math is clear there. 71% of the manga in Japan is now digital. I mean, and that's a market that dwarfs the American comic market by far, not even close. So, I mean, people, for whatever reason, people are going digital. Now, I do think that, and it's something we, found out very early on, that, yes, the hardcore fan wants the book, no doubt about it. And that's a percentage of people that you'll get. But digital works on so many levels. I mean, let's just take how Lonzo ended his statement. Number one, that's the fastest way to get into people's hands, let them see it. And if you want feedback and critique, that's how it's going to happen. Because, what I tell people all the time, we do annual art tournaments, and we do various things, short story events where we've had creators who've gone through it and actually become published authors. And the thing I tell them all the time is, number one, is that critique from people who genuinely are reading the story is not going to happen from your mom and your dad. It's not going to happen from your aunt and your uncle. It's not going to happen from your homeboy, your homegirl. That's not critique. That's people who are giving you that because you did something and accomplished it, as a good friend or a good family member would be. Someone who genuinely buys the stuff. A fan is not someone who clicks a like button. A fan is someone who has to take time out of their schedule, travel somewhere, purchase your item where they could have purchased any other item wherever they're for, the store or it's a convention, and then have the desire to read it. That's real critique. That's real engagement, because that's a real consumer relationship you're going to have, and that's what everyone seeks. Everyone is seeking that if you're in the publishing space, because that's an audience you can build from. So like I said, I think digital helps kind of get people out there and so forth. And so I would tell every young creator, get your stuff out there as best you can. Printing is very difficult. I mean, first of all, you got to have money, and a lot of folks, let's not pretend, have a lot of money to do this stuff. So you got to have money. As someone else, Lonzo said, that I agree with 100% about the notion of artists and so forth. Yeah, I tell people, like, I remember saying this to White Manga, at Apple Black. I remember saying this very early on. I'm much older than all of our folks. So I tell them, like, look, you can be a star, you can be a manga creator, you can be a great artist. All three are not going to happen simultaneously. You're going to have to be good at one of them. One of them you're going to have to really be damn good at to actually get to the next level. LeBron James is all these different things, but first and foremost, he was a badass basketball player. Same thing with Lionel Messi, same thing with Michael Jackson. You don't get to, and I think young people today with the internet have got it confused. They say, and I don't think they get a lot of good role models to begin with, but they get confused thinking I can be everything at once just by putting it out there. And the problem with social media is that therefore then it creates the idea that, well, I just need people to see me. And so therefore their behavior becomes the star, not the work, not the effort, the behavior. You know, whatever I can do to escalate engagement. I can talk mess about somebody. I can go out and make a fool of myself. There's one artist that we saw one time that they would paint something and then set it on fire. And that's what they got known for. And it's like, well, how does this helping you sell books? Like, what does this have to do with you selling books? But the point being is that, you know, yeah, I think digital has a great place for a lot of young people, particularly again, when we're talking about diversity, because it's giving people a chance who typically might not be in a position to try to make that happen on their own. All that being said, though, when it comes to creators, I think, you know, the thing that I tell people all the time, though, is look at the market. Look at the market. Something we're going to start doing. We do it internally within Saturday. Something we're going to start doing for a lot of our readers out there is to go out and actually we do store visits. So our books are Barnes and Nobles, Books A Million, a lot of comic book stores. But I'll go to Target, I'll go to Walmart, I'll go to different stores, and I'll take a picture of what they have on their shelves, because what they have on their shelves tells you what's selling. It tells you what people are buying. And so from that standpoint, you can sit there and say to yourself, okay, well, you know, if I want to have a career at this, there's a difference between art and commerce. You know, anybody can make art, and it's only art to you. But commerce is a whole different story. That means people actually connect with what you're doing, and they view it as entertainment. They view it as something transformational. And so, you know, linking the two things is really hard. But first and foremost, if you're trying to get into this space, ask yourself what it is you're trying to do. What are you doing? What are you bringing to the table that no one else is doing? All three of us are talking about diversity. But what else is there? Is there diversity in fantasy? Is there diversity in queer relationships? Is there diversity in manga? Is there diversity in superheroes? Is there diversity in, you know, horror and science fiction? Like, what are you bringing to the table that hasn't been done before? And then start asking yourself, okay, how's the market respond to this? What other things work with that? And how can I put my own stamp on that? And it's hard, but I think that really helps young people, again, try to build like a real pathway forward. Because again, the reality is that, just to be blunt, not everyone is going to end up having, you got three folks here who have publishing companies. The average person who watches this, who's looking for clues, is not going to create a publishing company. That's not going to happen. They're just trying to figure out how to get their work out there. They might end up working for a publisher company, right? So the issue is, okay, so like, I'm not here to tell people how to create the next publishing company. Again, it's out there, but it's a business. Every business is going to be different. What works for them might not work for everybody else. But the question first is, how do I get to be a creative in this space? What am I bringing to the table that allows me to have a place on this marketplace because I'm offering something that no one else is? If you figure that part out, you got a really good pathway ahead of you.
Absolutely. You bring up a lot of really good points. When it comes down to getting your books out there, I think you, all three of you bring up a really good point of making sure that you're very clear about what you're bringing to the market, what you're bringing. And of course, Fred, you know, how does your book size up against your quote unquote, your market peers or your market competitors? That's a very good point. Shifting the conversation a little bit to another side, because we're talking a lot about kind of like marketing and digital, the internet space. Another large part of comic books is the conventions. That's the handshaking, connecting with crowds. How do you all approach selling books at conventions? Do you have any tips or tricks, or is there something, or do you prefer conventions? Do you not prefer conventions? Just your thoughts on selling at conventions. And we'll start with Lonzo, and then we'll move on to Fred, and then we'll move on to Newton.
I feel like Comic Cons are extremely important for up and coming creatives and, you know, people that have been in the game for a few years or more. A lot of people don't buy online. A lot of people will see that we posted something online. They'll be like, "Yo, I'll be at such and such con to get that." They follow the tour like they would follow their old favorite bands back in the day, or their own, you know, celebrities and stuff like that. And some people don't like to look at themselves as, you know, celebrities and stuff like that. But when you go to a cons, there's a pro line for a reason. You know, people go to meet these pros. Even if they do have the book already, they come there to talk to you and ask you questions. They want to see, why did you write this character in on page 15 of issue 3? What's the importance of that? So you give your fans a chance to really interact with you and understand how you think. But also you get a chance to let them see that it's more to you than just, I'm Lonzo, this is my book, buy it. You know, you kind of get to build a memory. You know, I often meet a lot of people that hire me for consulting and coaching. Most of them meet me at conventions because they may say something to me and I just drop a gem in their head and they're like, yo, that really gonna help me out and make me want to get into the field. And next thing I know, next time I see them, that same convention next year, they got a book that they want to show me. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's, to me personally, that's one of my favorite things, just seeing the in real life effect that our stories have on people and really what they think, man. It can be intimidating for somebody that's not used to selling or being a salesman, being your own salesman in person. And I always say to people that are intimidated about it, don't be afraid to find somebody that can be your salesman at the table. You don't have to be the voice. You don't have to be the guy speaking and talking, but you can get somebody that's very good at that. And you just sit there, answer the questions that you need, and sign the book. But you don't want to be an asshole at the table either. Keep that eye contact, talk clearly. Don't be affected by the people that say no, because you're only hunting for the yeses. And just keep a level head, man. Comic Cons are great. They're fun. You really get to see the community and meet people that you didn't even know were following you. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in love with Comic Cons. I'm old. I'm old. Those cons can be a lot. I remember we did our first con and we were at Crunchyroll Expo. That was our very first big convention. We've done small ones before that, but and then we were at the first Anime NYC. And I remember we had to cart, it was a small company. We had to carry all these heavy boxes and stuff. I'm not a fan of Comic Con again, but I'm in my late 50s. I'm in mid 50s, so maybe that's me. But we do have fun with them, and I think we've done our own event, Saturday Con, and we have fun with them. And the fans are amazing. They've traveled from all over to see us. I think when it comes to conventions, I think that there's two things that I think, especially for people watching this who are doing original stuff, there's two things to keep in mind. The first is that it is always going to be hard to sell your stuff. I don't care if you're a big brand, or a small brand. It's going to be hard to sell your stuff. And the reason is because, very simply, if you're in a really big convention, I think Lonzo said it earlier, maybe about there are big stars there. And again, let's be clear what a star is. A star is not someone who's a star because they think they're a star. They've worked on superhero books that actually sell better than everything, right? They've worked on X-Men. They've worked on Batman. So they're stars. They have a real cachet with a certain demographic. And so that makes it difficult, when you're there and you're trying to sell your stuff. Now, when we started Saturday AM, I went there because I've been coming from the video game industry and haven't done a lot of E3s. I sat all my guys down and we did kind of a plan, kind of this a way here's how you approach people, here's how you talk. We got some folks who are really dynamic at it. There's one guy named Jay Oden who's just marvelous at it. We got other folks who are a little shy, right? Because they're not used to public speaking, they're not used to all that. But on the other hand, though, I think that the challenge though with that I just want to caution young people too is that, look, I remember this young man came up to me one of the last shows we did, and he was like, "Man, I want to be like you guys," and he had a booth that was killing it, crushing it. And I told myself, I said, "Well, son, you're doing pretty well." Now, mind you, what he was selling were prints of existing superheroes and anime characters. And while he and I were talking, one young kid comes up. He's like, "Hey, how much is that My Hero Academia?" He's like, "Oh, I'm sold out of it stuff." He's like, "Oh." And he looks around. He's like, "How much is that JK?" He's like, "I'm sold out of that too." He's like, "Okay." Kind of dipped his head back down and walked away. And I told him, I said, now see, that's the difference right there, right? Because my booth, it's all original stuff. Clock Striker, that's an original character. That's our own IP. Apple Black, Orisha, Soul Beat, all this stuff. I said, look, here's the reality. That exchange that you just had, you probably could have clocked 120, 60 bucks, 120 bucks, 200 bucks in seconds. When they come to my booth, it's a conversation. Because they want to learn, okay, what is a Saturday AM thing? I've heard about it. Who are these characters? I saw something about this clock thing. Tell me more about that. And that's a conversation. Great conversation. But all of that may lead to $60, $40, $100. But it takes time to process that. And that, when you are a sole person, when you're the only person at your booth, and you've got a bunch of content, that can be really difficult because now people are coming up to you wanting to talk. You've got to navigate trying to sell stuff, but at the same time trying to educate people who can become fans. It's difficult. And so I would just say is that the convention circuit's great, if nothing else, because you not only you get a chance to meet people, meet fans, but you also get a chance to meet other creators. And this is a very, very intimate business, right? I mean, it's creating content is here, and then here on the screen, and then engaging with fans is literally you. Like there's no buffer between that. You got to engage with the fans directly, whether it's social media or directly talk to them. So I think that those things make it valuable, extremely valuable. Like you also get to meet other creators, but it is difficult. I mean, putting together a booth is not cheap, especially if you're at a big show. I mean, I just got done paying $10,000 for a booth coming up soon. Like that ain't cheap. You know what I'm saying? Like that's not cheap. That's just the booth. That's not counting anything else. So the shipping your books, all that stuff. So find my people in. So it's a lot, but it's a good show. It's a great way to connect with people. I still think that, it's not necessarily mandatory that you do it, but I think that it's a good opportunity for people. At least try it once or twice.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you did bring that up, and we'll revisit that after. Newton. Yeah, cost. We definitely got to talk about that before we get off of this thing here. But Newton, I just wanted to get your opinions about convention selling as well. Suggestions, thoughts, your approach to selling at cons?
So I love cons. Sometimes I feel the same way. I don't like cons because all the work. And I'm an old man, so I'm like, it takes a lot out of me physically. But on the flip side, being there and like the other gentleman said, the people that you meet, are great. It gives you a burst of energy, like psychologically. You may be at a point where you're like, damn, I've been doing this for a while, but I'm at the same level, or something else, something about the place that you're in right now. You might be in like a negative zone, right? But you go to a con, you meet people, and it's like it's just crazy the feeling that you get when you make that connection. And my fellow comic book creators know, like when somebody comes to your table and tells you that they really like your story, and then sometimes they'll pinpoint something in your story that you didn't even think about, but then like, oh yeah, I like the part, and they'll say something, you're like, wow, I didn't even think about that. I was like, but they come at it with a different perspective. And so one of the other things I like about cons too is it helps you learn how to pitch your book. Like I'll be at cons and you develop your pitch. And sometimes I'm like, if I have a new book out, like recently I had like Keisha Demeanor, I was like, man, how am I gonna pitch this book? Because from my first book, I realized like the way you pitch the book, you don't really need to tell like the whole story or anything. Like you just need to focus on a few points that's in the book. It doesn't even have to be in the same order. You just focus on the few points in the book, and then once you get that, you're golden. Like you can pitch. And the best thing about pitching at a con is like you get to see people's reaction like while you're talking. Because I'll watch people. Because after a while, your pitch, you've already memorized it. You've said it so many times, so you know it. But you're watching people's face and their reaction to see what they say. Sometimes you might stumble and say a different word than you normally do, and you say, oh wow, look, that got a better reaction, so I'm gonna tweak my pitch. So you're tweaking your pitch, and then sometimes you go to different cons, and for whatever reasons, some of them have their own nuances. Like you'll start talking and you realize like, man, I'm talking too slow for these people, so you speed it up, and then it's like, okay, yeah. Another place, you try the same thing, no, you realize like, nah, I need to slow it down. So little things like that. It helps you learn how to apply what in the real world. Like if somebody was asking me about my book, you said it so many times at a con that you got it like memorized, and just talking about your book with people also helps you. When you are online and you're talking about your book, it might help you connect, because whatever you've discussed with that other person in real life, you can you could share that and say, oh, you know what, people really ask about this, and or they bring this up a lot. So, I can make sure that that's like a major talking point. So, cons, perfecting that pitch is one of the great things. And like I said, meeting people, sometimes you're a little lucky and you either break even or, make some money sometimes. And one of the things though is like I got to a point where I don't really travel to cons if I know it's not going to be a lot of foot traffic, and I can't make my there's a chance that I might not be able to make. So I've made business decisions like that. I know some people they'll still go to con at big losses, but I've gotten to the point where like I need to make sure that I have good cash flow, and I can't I can't be if I can't afford to be there, then I'm not gonna really make it there. And I'm trying to think like I don't want, I could go on and on about cons.
Right. No, no, no. I think and like I said, you and Fred have brought up a really good point about conventions that I think a lot of people don't talk about. It is just purely the cost of doing the business. I'm sure all of you are very much aware. A lot of people, when they go to conventions, they think, oh, you're probably just bought the books. But as Lonzo mentioned before, printing is expensive, but it's not just that. It's also the table cover and the little acrylic stands that your book may sit on, and the poster with your brand's name on it. And even small things like making sure you have ample enough business cards or QR codes so that people can scan them. Conventions cost quite a, or just as everyone had mentioned, the table cost itself. It's not, you don't get into conventions for free. If you're getting into one for free, it's probably not a very large or probably very affluent event. So those table costs cost quite a bit. So with that being said, how do you all approach the cost of actually selling books? Because sometimes people will say you got to spend money to make money. How do you all approach the cost that it takes to not just sell your books up front at conventions, but also there's a bit of cost online as well? What is your approaches? And we'll start with you, Newton, then we'll move to Lonzo, and then we'll end with Frederick.
Okay, yeah, so when it comes to cost, like I said, for one of the things that helps me out is Kickstarter. So, like I mentioned before, I did a Kickstarter to fund the printing of my book. So, that helped. And then there are other things that you can do to avoid like high costs. Make sure you got the right printer and things of that nature. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely am a fan of the Kickstarter route. We all love good Kickstarter around here. Lonzo, how do you approach the sale of your books?
Do you mean like the sell just in general, or the sell at cons with the cost of tables and stuff like that?
The cost wise, either selling online digitally or selling at conventions.
Well, similar to Newton, we use our Kickstarter sort of like a pre-order. We already put down the general investment to make the book, so people never have to worry about if our Kickstarter doesn't succeed or not. If the book is coming out, the book is coming out, but the Kickstarter just kind of helps us get back to the green line, to where after that everything's profit, and when just printing and shipping costs. But online sales, shipping is covered through the customer, so it's not really a thing for us. And just making sure we link with a good printer. We luckily have a partnership with a good printer where we count all the cents, all the dollars. I know exactly what book is going to make what. And when we put it into comic shops, just that's where the loss comes at the comic shops, but you gain in quantity. So it's kind of like that's one of the constant battles as an indie publisher is you want to do high volume at a lower cost, or a higher cost with lower volume. And which one do you want to live with? Which one makes you happy? They're both hard to do. You got to hustle in each one of them. And when it comes to Comic-Con, as far as costs, depending on where you're going, if you got to travel and stuff like that, I like to count if I got to get a hotel, what's that? Gas. I got to eat that weekend as well. Table cost is this, and my books cost me this much to print. So my goal is always that Friday, I at least got to knock out table and hotel. Then Saturday is usually when I start seeing profit, because that's just kind of how it works out. And then Sunday is all me. Sunday's all me, baby. So just doing that. And I think all three of us are at a status too right now where if a con or a event is hitting us up to come there, and we look at the numbers and what it's going to be costing us to get there, oftentimes we can request to be guested at the event, and sometimes they throw on tables and they do stuff like that because they know we're going to bring a crowd as well. We're going to promote, we're going to do our part. But me coming to this con is more of me doing a favor for you than it is you doing for us, and not everybody can do that, but you can try at the same time and see what you got. At the end of the day, maybe you just got to save costs, save your dollar as best you can, but also be true to where your position is in the selling market,
Absolutely. And Frederick, same question for you. How do you approach the sale of your books cost wise, digitally or in person?
Well, again, to be clear, digital is cheaper, right? So we're talking about there are three. Let's talk about three different costs, just in three different buckets, just to make it streamlined. There's the cost of the creative, and that has different aspects to it. So whether you're doing through Kickstarter or you're doing it out of pocket or you got some other avenue of doing it, there are two ways that companies are going to look at that, and the creative going to look at that. One is what paid up front to do this, and then the second is there a back end? And so those are some of the challenges that exist on the creative till. I know companies that are acclaimed companies that don't really pay anything on the front end, including, by the way, even Image Comics is not really paying you up front for your comics. That's just, I don't know if people in the industry know that, but like Image does not give you a fat check ahead of time. But on the flip side, then, there are some companies that they have like 100% royalty rate. Like they're going to get you royalties immediately or pretty consistently. And other companies might struggle with that because, again, getting books sold is very hard. This is not an industry that just because you want it to happen means it's going to happen. It's a zero-sum game. You put everything into it, you might get nothing out of it. So zero sum. But it's the creative is a tricky part. Get past that, then the production of the book, and that is difficult. I mean, look, like I said, everything from the cover to the paper stock, the actual paper itself. In our covers, kind of got like this little kind of embossed sort of feel on the logo. All of that stuff is expensive. It's expensive. I don't care what's going on in the world. It's expensive. Paper is not a resource. It just continually multiplies. Like it's got limitations to it in terms of what's available, what's not. Getting print time, if you're printing either overseas or in America, those can be very complicated because getting the books printed means you got to have time on the print machine to get X amount of copies done. As Lonzo said, the more copies you print, the cheaper it is, but that means you're now paying a higher up front. So for example, if you're paying, let's say if you're going to get a price break in this book, which sells for, $14, if you're going to be able to say, I can print this book for $3 a unit. Now that's not the real number, but I can print it for $3 a unit, right? They're going to say, yeah, but you got to print 10,000 units. So math wise, you still at $30,000. Whether, however you look at it, you still at $30,000. Like there's no if, and, or but to that. Like I said, there is no DEI help that we get on that. You either got the money or you don't. It's that simple. Whether you're printing in China, you're printing here. It's the cost of printing is big. Once you then get past that, and one of the points that you raised earlier is the shipping. There are two shipping costs. One is shipping from wherever you got the book printed at. The other is called transportation. People always leave that part out because not only do you have to pay for the book to get to America or to get from the place that printed it to your main warehouse, but then you got to pay to transport it to wherever the second location is going to be. Amazon's warehouse, Comic Books Diamond, which may still not be in business anymore, but Lunar, whoever, you got to pay to get to their distribution centers. That's transportation. So those are two different things. Then you add on to it, of course, the fact that there's marketing, as you indicated, that you pay for, whether it's marketing inside of a previews catalog, marketing on social media. All of that is money before you even get to the convention. Now you're at the convention. And yes, now I'll be frank, yes, if it's a really, really big convention, we get some assistance. They want us there because of what we bring. We don't they're not paying for our table completely. Smaller conventions, yeah, they'll say we want you there. We'll give you a table, we'll do all this stuff, and that's definitely the case. But again, that's not everybody's thing. It is what it is. But I can tell you for a fact, having known a lot of people who run these conventions, I can tell you for a fact that the big time folks, not only do they get a free table, but they'll tell them, like, we're going to guarantee you 10 grand, 20 grand, 30 grand for the weekend just to be here. So like they're just getting paid cash just to be there. So that's just FYI. Like if you're that level of creator, you getting buku bucks just to be there. But yeah, you know, when you get there, then the thing that is really expensive is, I mean, the travel is a whole nother story, because again, depending on how big you are, depending if you got like me, you got people around the world, you got to fly to different places. That's expensive, but that's a different thing. If you have your booth, if you're going to have books at that booth, let me tell you what people do not understand: how expensive it is to ship books. You pack a bunch of these books into a box, that it becomes really heavy, and there's no if and or but to it. It becomes really, really heavy, and now all of a sudden, that shipping cost, because not based on like, I'm shipping 100 books. It's all about the pounds, and that's where the rate starts going through the roof. And so, just getting books to you is a pain in the butt. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, forget the creator. Just getting the books to you can be a pain in the butt, because depending on what volume you think you're going to do, that is a massive hurdle. Getting the books to you safely as well. You don't want bent covers. You don't want the books to be, messed up and everything, because that's money. That's got a value to it. So yeah, I mean, I know that you could spend, and I would say that for a company our size, we did our own show called Saturday Con. Probably spent about $35,000. That was a small show. Probably spent about $35,000 just getting all my people in from New Zealand, France, whatever, and then getting the books and then getting the banner up and everything. But then you could spend that much just getting into New York Comic Con. You know what I mean? Just getting like a big New York Comic Con. Now, if you're doing Artist Alley, that's a lot cheaper. That's what creators can shoot for. It's a lot cheaper, a lot different sort of scenario with that. But again, there's other aspects to it, and it's I think, as Lonzo said, I think it was Lonzo, but I think at the end of the day, it's all kind of relative, right? What are you looking to do? If you're looking to say, you know what, I'm going to cover the cost of my hotel and my and the booth or whatever I had to pay for the booth, yeah, that's I think a reasonable thing to look at. But even the big companies, like I would be hard pressed when I know how much Viz and Marvel pay for their booths. I'd be hard pressed to believe that they're going to make that much money in a weekend to cover the cost of everything they had to pay to have that show. Because remember, all their stuff includes things hanging from the ceiling. Something hanging from the ceiling is $6,000 by itself. Depending on where you are, that's $6,000 to hang a sign. All of that, plus all their big creators and all their staff, and then they do like panels and do all other stuff. I find it hard to believe they sell enough books to justify the cost of the whole weekend.
No, you bring up some very, very, very important points. Of course, as everyone has mentioned,
it is fun. I don't want to stop anybody. It's fun.
Oh yeah, of course, absolutely. I think there's
giving out you go by his booth. He gives out ice cream sandwiches. It's cool.
What I will say is, as an experienced con goer myself, and of course everyone here is a very experienced seller at conventions. I think there's some realism that comes with this. Comic books, manga, sequential art. All this it's we don't do it. We as creators don't just do this because we want the money. Clearly, this is labor of love. And if you genuinely love you want to make your own comic, you want to make your own manga, it's totally doable. But you have to be realistic about how much of an investment, not just time investment, not just emotional investment, but also financial investment that goes into, if you just want to make a book, or if you want to be like these gentlemen here, you want to run your company, there is a financial cost to it, which is why we're talking about it. And sometimes people get palm sweaty when they talk about money, but it's important to have these conversations. But my last question I'll ask you, gentlemen, if you could do it all over again, what would be 3 tips that you would have wanted to hear when you were just starting your business, and actually we're specifically talking about selling your books for the first time? And we'll start with you, Fred, and then we'll move to Newton, and then we'll end up with Lonzo.
I was hoping you go give me last. I'm trying to think. I got to think on that one.
Okay. Newton, do you have 3 tips that you would have wanted to hear for the first time you started selling books?
Yeah, that's a little tricky because 3 tricks. So I guess one of the advice I wish I had heard earlier is, I knew the idea of cash flow management was important, but I would have told myself that how important it is, just cash flow, because making comic books is expensive, and sometimes you don't want to overspend on expenses when you have the something coming up and you need that cash when it comes in. So balancing that a little tricky. And then the second thing is uh I would have told myself to maybe actually, man, I did everything perfectly. I'm not sure what. Nah, I just can't remember any more mistakes right now.
I hear you. I hear you. No. I mean, I've read the books. They are maybe we're maybe amongst perfection here. No, but I definitely agree. Being mindful of the money that you're spending and the money that you need to make certain transactions, make things go. That's an important tip. Let's see. Fred, do you happen to have those 3 tips in mind? You got some tips you would have told yourself?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. The first thing I would say is a calendar convention. I mean, a Comic-Con or a convention calendar. A convention calendar. I think the conventions. There's kind of like a moment each year, and typically in the summertime. And again, I'm talking the big shows, obviously, but it's all relative. But you start like the big shows. Start to kick off kind of like in May, and then it runs all the way until late August or October, depending if you're going to count New York Comic Con, which is a big con. But I'm talking about just where you got something literally happening every month, right? It's just like boom, it's just literally from there. Like last couple of years ago, I was like in California for the whole month because I was at Anime Expo and then San Diego Comic Con and then American Library Association. So try to get a convention list together of the things that you think you'd like to go to, whether it's strategic. By the way, some of these conventions you don't have to go to sell stuff. Go to be a part of the panels. Go to meet certain people you want to meet. Go to engage with creators and so forth. But I think it's a good thing to plan in advance about the conventions that are coming up. It helps you understand where you kind of want to put your energy, right? The second thing I would say is libraries. I think that too few creators consider the library. One of the biggest resources we've had has been librarians who have championed Saturday AM. We're in a lot of libraries across country. We have library editions of our books that we did deal with Learner for. So we're actually in schools across the country. This is really that a future audience member or consumer that you have access to and their parents that's going to come from the library, because the reality is that, again, maybe the mom who's going to make the most of the purchase decisions, as typically is done in America, maybe they're not online like that or not on the websites that you want to have your product at. And then conversely, they're not going to hear about you. So you want to be where the consumer is. And I think libraries we kind of ignore libraries at our own peril. Focus on the libraries. You got a chance, even if it's local libraries, get in and start trying to engage with them, because not only can they tell you what young people are into, but they can give you really good feedback about your content and how that connects with what they think the young readers might be into. If you're speaking to young readers, again, that's just a relevant thing. And the last thing I would just say is that it's nothing I can really say to myself back then, but I think even now, one of the things that I think is woefully missing is good journalism in the comic medium space, especially as it relates to Black creators, Black. You look at I think everyone that's on here. I can't think of too many articles I've read on Comic Book Resources or IGN or comicbook.com about us or these two, and I think that there's a problem there. Something I've been talking about a lot. I was on Comics Pro's board of advisory board, which is the kind of group for the entire comic industry, and of course I'm the only Black-owned publisher there. And I think there's a problem there. There's something there where I think that we've got to. It should have happened years ago, but there's something to be said about the lack of press that Black creators and Black owners get. And the reason why that matters, the reason why that's something I would tell myself 3 years ago, is because you go into this thinking that that's not relevant because, I'm going to make the books, you're going to like it, yada, yada. That's not true. That's just not true. The reality, again, is that it's all about exposure, period, full stop. It's about exposure. And when a major website that's read by me, we had just one quick story, because I know I'm going on for a minute, but I apologize for that. But one quick story. A couple of days ago, we had an article written on ICV2. If you guys are not on ICV2, you should go look on ICV2. But ICV2, they're connected to the comic industry. They do they're kind of like an industry Bible. So they did an article about us for Manga Week. Now, we didn't participate in Manga Week this year like we normally do, but they have a whole week where they interview, Viz and every major manga publisher. They did an article about us, and they called out the fact that our title, Underground, was the only American winner of the international manga contest that was done in Japan. And I had never thought about that. I had never phrased it as that when I talked about the fact that we won that award. But at the same time, they did. And I got to tell you, I've gotten more. I literally, while we were doing this call, got a note from an anime studio in Japan, which we already deal with them already. But I got one from another CEO of an anime studio in Japan. I assume because he saw that article. The fact of the matter is that we do not get the level of promotion, credit, discussion, or legitimacy that other companies and other group communities get in the comic book forums. And until that changes, that is going to always be a problem that's going to impact up and coming creators. Because the fact of the matter is that when I can sit there and look at someone like my frat brother, Sanford Green, who's a big time comic book artist at Marvel Comics, and I can look at this brother and know that he's been in this game for 20 some years. He's just now getting his flowers, but he's been in this thing for decades. Something ain't right about that, because I can find plenty of young white artists who work for Marvel and DC who are getting flowers left and right now, and they're not even 30 years old. So I think, that there's something to be said about that. And I think that any young creator coming into the space who's not already thinking of that, I'm not talking about, because I've seen those groups, I'm not talking about the little groups of like black creators that just kind of like hang out and talk to one another on Facebook. I ain't talking about that. I'm talking about legitimate news coverage that's reaching a mainstream audience that might really be into the stuff that we're doing, but they just don't know about it. That's something I think should be talked about more, and we should be fighting to change that. And that means pushing these companies to do better with the coverage that they have.
Absolutely. It's so important. And finally, Lonzo, yourself as well. 3 tips or tricks or something that you tell to yourself, or at this point to a new creator just now getting into actually selling their books.
Very good points from both these brothers. I would say one thing I wish I would have done personally when I first started was have more of a plan for the longer run. I was, when I first started doing comics, I just wanted to get that one done. I'm like, let me just get this done so then I can see what the rest looks like. And, I guess that was the best way to do it, rather than some people invest too big in the beginning. But taking my time, but being more direct with getting more books done in a shorter time period versus because right now I'm seeing the benefit of having a trade and seeing how easy that is to push, more so than a single issue, or like having an issue 3 is very hard to push. You know what I'm saying? But having a 1 through 3 is also good to push. But yeah, just being more direct with what is your actual business model, and what's the arc? I wasn't thinking of arcs at that moment. I was just thinking like, let me just tell the story and just get it out there. You know what I mean? So now my mind, like when I'm creating my new projects and new stories, or I'm publishing new creators, I already know I need to know what that arc is, how many issues is it, what's this going on. Okay, this is how we're going to put it out and release it. And it's making the progress so much faster. And that's what I would have done earlier on, is really have that model set up. But I had to go through the mud to be who I am. So, it is what it is. Number 2, I would say to new creators, get into your community a lot sooner. That's been my biggest thing in these last couple of years. We ended off last year with one of our biggest projects with the Liberty Knights, partnering with the Voter Project in Philadelphia, selling over 100,000 copies in a week, which is crazy. But that's because it was helping the community. You know, it was something that was bigger than just making a comic book that was just a cool story. This was to motivate people to go out there and register to vote. And in return, people saw, yo, who's this company, Concrete Comics? Man, they dope. And when they go to their website, they see a bunch of comic books, and it just helped out. So, and then I'm doing the school books, the K-Way High book, focusing on mental health and social awareness, and that thing's blowing up too. And we're gonna have a curriculum soon. So, in my eyes, there's no point in making superhero stories if I don't want to help save the world in real life, right? So, that's really where my focus is, and everything else follows that. So yeah, for any young cats, man, try to really get into your community. It don't gotta be a big, large scale save the world project. Just your neighborhood. Start there. Find a Boys and Girls Club or some type of community center that doesn't have somebody like you to come there and talk. They don't know nobody like you. So when you walk in there, you're the star now, because they're like, yo, I didn't know we had a guy lived around the corner that was making comic books and doing this and doing that. Now you're the guy now. So, hop in that, man. And I guess third of all, I would say definitely, man, if you're a new creator, do a con, do a small one, do something local, a little local farmer's market or something. Do something. Set up that table and learn your pitch, practice your pitch, and just enjoy, spread the love and the gospel of something that you love. That's it. Don't be afraid to talk about what you love and what you do, man. Somebody's gonna love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, we have had such a wonderful conversation about books, getting your books out to different markets. We talked about different strategies, talked about business plans, talked about marketing. We talked about even just philosophy on sales. And I think having your perspectives on this panel and for today for Ink and Panels has been so impactful. And I hope our audience who's watching this was able to take something from this. Of course, before we sign out, please let the audience know where we can find you online. Definitely, just one more time, tell us who you are.
Yeah. So, So my name is Newton Lillevoix. You can find me on all social medias at Dream Fury Comics. That's DREAMFURY Comics.
Yeah, my name is Frederick L. Jones, and I'm the publisher of Saturday AM. And you can find us pretty much on all social media, Saturday AM, but our web address is www.saturday-am.com.
Yeah, my name is Derek Lonzo Starr Island, and you can find me at concretecomics.com. That's concrete with a K, KONKRET, comics.com. And that's on all social medias.
And of course, I'm sure their information will be somewhere here. Thank you guys again for your time. I'm so appreciative. And we'll see y'all back again. Thank y'all for watching. I'm so bad at ending these panels, but we'll see you around.
Nah, you did good.
You did great, man.